The holographic screen buzzed softly as laughter echoed through the operations hall of Zevra Prime, the most fortified Galactic Coalition outpost in the Pashorn Verge. Alien officers from half a dozen star systems lounged in hovering recliners, sipping glowing liquids, watching centuries-old footage from Earth, a grainy clip of human soldiers crawling through mud, shouting commands in primitive languages. One of the officers, a towering VA Reth with bioluminescent facial tendrils, snorted. "These are the infamous Earth Special Forces," he sneered, voice like static on steel. "I've seen my hatchlings play rougher games." General Kaltosh, a rigid-scaled Bravari commander, chuckled along. "They still believe those mammals are some apex warrior race. Let them. It keeps them docile." More laughter. Another clip played, a helmet cam of a SEAL team storming a compound in some long-forgotten desert, efficient and deadly. But in this room, it was a comedy reel, not history. Only one officer didn't laugh. A young, lean Erixian analyst named Talik, barely out of training, stared intently at the footage. There was something in the human's eyes, focus, calculation, something primal. He opened his mouth to speak, but before sound could form, a low klaxon hummed through the chamber. The screen flickered, then turned black. A single line appeared: perimeter breach. Sector Theta 7. Zero audio. No visual. The laughter stopped. Far below the orbital defense canopy, in the jungle-shadowed lower decks of the facility, 6 shadows moved through silence. No radio chatter. No heavy footfalls. No mistakes. The SEALs had landed. The full capsule had disintegrated on impact by design, nothing to trace. Lieutenant Eric Maddox raised a closed fist, signaling a halt. His visor's HUD flickered green, movement ahead. 2 sentries. Alien. Armed. Idle. Maddox tapped twice on his forearm, a ghost signal fluttered through the team's neural mesh. Petty Officer Harlan flanked right, Ramirez left. 30 seconds later, both guards were slumped in the undergrowth, throats severed, weapons untouched. 2 down. No alerts triggered, Maddox subvocalized. The team continued. They weren't here by permission. Earth's diplomatic channels had been ignored for weeks. Human test subjects, civilians abducted from border colonies, had been tracked here, to Zevra Prime's restricted labs. Earth's ambassadors filed protests. The Galactic Council scoffed. No evidence. No jurisdiction. Maddox's orders were clear: extract any human prisoners, destroy the lab, leave no trace. 0 casualties among civilians. Infinite among hostiles. The jungle ended at a metallic wall covered in moss and vines, a false cliff, hiding an entry port. Petty Officer Jine tapped a sequence on a black tablet. Seconds later, the wall shimmered and dissolved into a silent passage. They slipped inside like smoke, weapons drawn, boots silent on steel. Inside the facility, lights pulsed in alien hues. A cleaning drone passed them, oblivious, its sensors scrambled by a viral signal uploaded by specialist Yelena 2 minutes before insertion. They moved in staggered formation, each man covering the blind spot of the next, the corridor swallowing them whole. Maddox's mind drifted to the briefing: high-value captives, 1 known scientist among them. The lab was buried 3 levels down, bioweapon development zone, allegedly decommissioned. Intel confirmed it wasn't. And the experiments, they weren't just violations of galactic law. They were something worse. "Split," he whispered. "Alpha to sabotage. Bravo with me." The teams diverged, their presence nothing more than shadows dancing between sensor blind spots. Not even the AI watchdogs noticed them. Yelena had infected them before she even landed. Above them, in the command tower, Talik's fingers tapped furiously at his console. "Sir, we have multiple sensor blinks in Sector Theta 7. Pulse patterns suggest movement." General Kaltosh scoffed. "A glitch. Run diagnostics." Talik hesitated. Respectfully, "I think it's coordinated." Kaltosh leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we're being infiltrated? Here? By what, humans?" More laughter, bitter this time. "Please, analyst. The last time Earth sent soldiers this far into space, they cried over rations and begged for extraction. Talek looked back at the footage, then at his own diagnostic feed. He didn't laugh. On sublevel 3, Maddox crouched beside a locked blast door. His breath was steady, heart rate low. On the other side, the lab. Likely guards. Maybe captives. Maybe corpses. Status, he whispered. Ramirez's voice pinged back. Alpha's in place. Power conduits rigged. Backup grid will fry in 90 seconds. Execute on my mark, Maddox said. Copy. He laid a small device against the door, no detonation, no breach. It radiated a pulse that told the door to think it was open. With a whisper of metal, the barrier slid aside. Inside was hell. 2 humans were strapped to cold slabs, barely breathing. Tubes threaded through their limbs. Monitors in alien scripts flashed warnings. One of the scientists, a Carillion, looked up and reached for an alarm. Jine dropped him with a suppressed shot before the second blink. Clear, Ramirez said. Maddox knelt beside the captives. One stirred, a woman. Her eyes fluttered open. Earth, she whispered. You're going home, Maddox said, and meant it. Above, Talek gasped. Commander, Sector 3 just lost all power. Blast doors opened without protocol. Lab biofeeds are down. Kaltosh turned, the smirk finally gone. Deploy security drones. Now. Maddox's HUD blinked again, countdown reached 0. Every light in the facility dimmed. Then the screams began. In the control tower, screens flickered. Every feed from the lower levels was static. Doors sealed. Cameras looped. Sensor arrays shut down. And then, in total silence, a message appeared on every terminal. Special Forces. Not to be mocked. Kaltosh stood frozen. Who, the hell, is in my house? Talek whispered, Earth. The first explosion wasn't loud. It was surgical. In the maintenance wing, deep beneath Zevra Prime's fortified barracks, a thermal conduit ruptured with pinpoint precision. No shrapnel, no fireball, just an instant vacuum collapse that rendered 6 Galactic guards unconscious before they knew they were dying. A split second later, 3 more conduits along adjacent corridors blinked out in synchronized failure. The internal security AI, once confident in its surveillance reach, now swam in ghost data and corrupted threat assessments. Lieutenant Eric Maddox didn't smile. He didn't need to. This was textbook: destabilize infrastructure, force confusion, strike while command is blind. But this time, the textbook was being rewritten with every silent step they took. Maddox raised 2 fingers. Halt. Petty Officer Harlan stepped forward, retrieved a chip from his belt, and inserted it into a glowing panel on the wall. The chip hissed as alien code dissolved, overwritten by crude Earth algorithms. Earth's tech was decades behind the Coalition's, but that's what made it unpredictable. And in war, unpredictability was lethal. Security turret blind zones in 30 seconds, Harlan confirmed, voice barely above breath. Maddox looked up. 2 spherical drones hovered at the end of the hall, silent sentinels primed for overkill. He held his hand out. Jine passed him a microthin shard, an adaptive mirror disk. Maddox slid it across the floor. It shimmered, projected an image of the corridor as if untouched, and blinded the drones to the 5 shadowy figures now moving right beneath them. Meanwhile, on the surface, alarms finally screamed into coherence. Kaltosh's voice thundered across command, seal all sublevels. Deploy drones. I want bodies, not warnings. Talek, eyes wide with disbelief, spoke more to himself than to anyone else. They're using our own systems against us, like they've trained for this exact layout. Kaltosh turned to him, nostrils flaring. You said humans wouldn't dare enter this quadrant. You said they were erratic. I was wrong, Talek whispered. They are not erratic. They are intentional. Elsewhere, the Alpha sabotage team had turned the generator bay into a trap maze. Petty Officer Yelena, crouched beside a coolant pump, planted the last of 6 EMP microbursts onto the central circuit array. A soft blink confirmed it, timing synced to Maddox's command. Once activated, every powered defense in a 2-kilometer radius would fry in less than 3 seconds. Ready to dance, Yelena murmured. In the lab sector, Maddox's team continued to ghost through corridors. Motion sensors they bypassed. Biometric locks they reprogrammed mid-step. At one corner, they encountered a squad of coalition troops, 4 heavily armed Marivoxan in exosuits. Maddox gestured, "Wait. No bullets. Too loud." Instead, Ramirez clicked a magnetic beacon to the ceiling as the squad passed beneath. 3 steps later, the beacon detonated in silence, compressive force that liquefied internals without a sound. The bodies dropped. No alarms. No blood. Just absence. Jine crouched near one of the fallen. They didn't even get to turn their weapons on. "They weren't meant to," Maddox replied. "We're not here for a war. We're the ghost that haunts it." Up above, Command watched the footage in helpless frustration. Cameras looped endless empty corridors. AI logs showed guards disappearing, bodies vanishing, lights flickering in nonsense patterns. "Where are they?" Kaltosh shouted. Talek scanned through residual static and caught a brief, haunting flicker, the phrase again, etched with a plasma knife into a bulkhead. "Special Forces. Not to be mocked. They're leaving messages," Talek muttered, his voice barely audible. Kaltosh snarled. "Messages? They are taunting us." "No," Talek replied. "They are teaching us." Back underground, Maddox reached the detention wing. Beyond the reinforced door were the last 2 captives, Earthborn, likely experiments. Jine worked the panel while Ramirez covered. When the lock disengaged, they stormed in with surgical aggression. The scene inside was worse than before, tubes threaded into spinal cords, retinal injectors, alien instruments dripping with fluids. One of the captives, a young man, looked up with hollow eyes. "Are you real?" he croaked. Maddox knelt. "You're going home." He reached to disconnect the systems. The boy screamed as neural clamps fired. Jine stepped in, bypassed the feedback lock with a spike tool. The clamps hissed, then went dark. Behind them, the corridor trembled. "Contact incoming," Ramirez whispered. Through the smoke emerged a massive figure, Galactic Battalion Commander Zorthek. 8 feet of armored arrogance, wielding a plasma maul and flanked by 2 riot drones. "Primitives," Zorthek sneered. "You dare crawl into our dominion?" Maddox rose. "We came to clean up your mess." Zorthek laughed, raising the maul. "You think your little squad of rats can change the order of the stars?" Maddox didn't speak. He moved. In a blur, he was inside the alien's guard. A blade flashed, ceramic-tipped, serrated. Zorthek swung, missed. Maddox drove the blade under the left rib, just beneath the armor seam. A twist. A jolt. The maul dropped with a clang. Zorthek gasped, dropping to a knee, eyes wide with shock. "You shouldn't be." Maddox leaned close. "We were exactly where we needed to be." Zorthek slumped. The drones powered up in retaliation, but Yelena's EMPs detonated on cue. The corridor went dark. Sparks danced in the air. "Extraction point in 5, Jine said, lifting the nearest captive. Maddox looked down at Zorthek's body. A grotesque reminder of what overconfidence tasted like. Back in the command tower, the screen sputtered. All feeds were gone. All signals blacked out. The last thing Kaltosh saw before everything died was a final transmission burned into the data stream. "Earth doesn't ask permission. We respond." The jungle canopy above Zevra Prime shimmered under the pulsing red light of distant orbital alerts. Thunder rumbled, not from weather, but from emergency drop pods slamming into the forest floor. Coalition reinforcements had arrived, but the SEAL team was already on the move, ghosts weaving between shadows. Lieutenant Maddox carried the injured captive over his shoulder, boots pressing silently into moss-dampened metal as they ascended a forgotten emergency stairwell. Behind him, Jine moved with deadly focus, weapon drawn, every corner scanned. Ramirez brought up the rear, cradling the second survivor, a woman still slipping in and out of consciousness. They had 13 minutes before the evac window closed. 12 before the entire facility collapsed. Above ground, the black site was already dying. EMPs had crippled the defense grid. Fires, some electrical, some deliberate, ate through walls and ceilings. Petty Officer Yelena, monitoring their route via a wrist HUD from the sabotage point, checked in. All exits rerouted. You've got a clean line to Sector 0. Birds inbound. Stay to Savalfa. Maddox asked, voice clipped. Gone dark, Yelena said after a pause. Last ping, manual detonation near Coolant Bay. Likely. Maddox didn't need her to finish. Sacrifices were part of the mission. Expected. Accepted. Regretted later. Atop the ridge, a sleek black silhouette shimmered into view, decloaking mid-hover, the Terran stealth evac craft, Wraith 7. A soft hum vibrated the treetops as its landing gear extended. Maddox signaled. Jine flashed a confirmation beacon. The ramp hissed open. But movement flickered along the edges of the clearing. 3 Coalition assault drones rose from the undergrowth, silent and spider-like, weapons locking in. Contact! Ramirez barked, diving for cover. Maddox didn't hesitate. He dropped the captive gently, rolled forward, and loosed 3 bursts from his suppressed carbine. 1 drone sparked and collapsed. Jine threw a pulse grenade, EMP-laced, neutralizing the second. The third fired. A rail shot grazed Maddox's shoulder, spinning him backward. Blood bloomed across his arm. He gritted his teeth, took a knee, and aimed again. The final drone collapsed in a rain of smoking limbs. Silence returned. Everyone up, he shouted. Get them aboard. Jine and Ramirez hauled the survivors onto the ramp. Maddox followed, clutching his shoulder. Yelena appeared from the trees moments later, face smudged with soot, her left arm burned. They exchanged no words, only a nod that said, done. Inside the Wraith, the 2 captives were secured in medical pods. The team braced as the ship lifted, rotating sharply to face away from the ridge. Through the side viewport, they saw it, Zevra Prime's black site imploding, sector by sector, in synchronized destruction. Yelena exhaled, eyes locked on the mushroom of green flame curling into the sky. We made our point, Ramirez muttered. Maddox, still seated, pulled a data chip from his vest and slid it into the terminal. The virus embedded in it would scatter fragments of the mission across dozens of channels, news feeds, black markets, encrypted comms. The galaxy would hear of what happened on Zevra Prime. Of what Earth did in the dark, without permission, without apology. On every Coalition-based terminal from the core to the fringe, the same message appeared hours later. Special Forces. Not to be mocked. In the Galactic Council chambers, diplomats read it in silence. Civilian broadcasts replayed glitchy images of burning labs and ghost-like figures. One distorted frame showed Maddox's face mid-turn, calm, cold, unreadable. The clip went viral. At outposts and academies, where humans had once been dismissed as wild primitives, instructors now included a new module, Terran Tactical Doctrine, Anomaly Threat Response. The phrase SEAL was no longer misunderstood, it was feared. General Kaltosh stood alone in the remnants of the command center. Smoke drifted through shattered walls. Monitors lay dead. Every trace of bravado had burned with the facility. Talek sat nearby, helmet in hands, staring at nothing. I told them, he muttered. Kaltosh didn't answer. His pride had been shattered more thoroughly than any hull breach. On Earth, Maddox stood in front of a 2-way glass panel at a debrief facility deep beneath the Rockies. His uniform was clean. His arm was bandaged. His eyes were tired but unflinching. Across the glass, one of the rescued captives was undergoing treatment. She'd spoken 4 words upon waking, they came for me. The mission was classified. Officially, Earth denied any involvement. Unofficially, every major power in the galaxy now adjusted its protocols. No more jokes. No more mockery. Humanity had drawn a line. Maddox didn't need medals or speeches. He only cared that his team came home. Most of them, at least. As he turned to leave, a junior officer approached him. Sir, Command asked if you had a final statement for the report. Maddox paused. Then, quietly, they underestimated the wrong species. He walked out, boots echoing on steel, the silence behind him far louder than any war cry. 2 weeks after the mission, the galaxy still hadn't decided how to react. Official statements from the Galactic Coalition labeled the Zevra Prime incident a tragic systems failure, followed by a terrorist attack of unknown origin. But the truth had already slipped through the cracks, slivers of leaked footage, survivor whispers, data fragments carrying Earth encryption tags. None of it confirmed, yet none of it denied. And that ambiguity made the fear spread even faster. Across dozens of worlds, elite training academies stopped teaching Earth tactics as outdated examples. Now, they studied Terran special forces with reverent anxiety. SEALs were no longer dismissed, they were dissected. Simulation programs reclassified them from irregular infantry to Class 9 stealth shock units. Instructors couldn't explain how 6 humans had infiltrated a planetary fortress and dismantled it from within, but the message was clear: Earth wouldn't be mocked again. Lieutenant Eric Maddox watched the ripples unfold from a quiet corner of Earth's Pacific Command, deep beneath the surface in a facility without a name. The ocean above lent the ceiling a dim, shifting light, as though the entire command center breathed in rhythm with the tide. Maddox sat alone, reviewing after-action reports, not for corrections, but for patterns. He didn't trust debriefs written by officers who hadn't bled. A door opened behind him. Rear Admiral Kwon stepped inside, her face unreadable, clipboard in hand. "You've made quite an impression," she said. Maddox didn't look up. That wasn't the objective. No, but it was inevitable. She placed the clipboard on the table. "The Council wants to speak. Not to reprimand. To understand." Maddox finally met her eyes. "They are too late for understanding. We've already been forgotten once. We don't let that happen again." Kwon nodded, but there was something unreadable in her expression. Not doubt. Not pride. Just a quiet recognition that the galaxy had changed, and they had lit the fuse. "3 of your team have been offered advanced rotation into Deep Recon. Including you." "No," Maddox said without hesitation. "No?" she asked, arching a brow. "I'll train the next ones. This only works if the silence continues. We don't need martyrs. We need shadows." She stared at him for a long moment, then turned and left. Maddox sat still for several minutes after, listening to the low, ambient hum of the facility. No alarms. No shouting. Just silence. The same silence that had followed them across Zevra Prime. It was the sound of being unseen, and yet unforgettable. Above him, on the surface, Earth moved on. Civilians lived their lives unaware that galaxies now adjusted policy in hushed, anxious meetings. But in orbit, on ships and stations, stories began to take root. Of the Terrans who walked through fire and left nothing but ashes. Of warriors with no insignia and no face. Some called them ghosts. Others demons. But the most accurate name came from a coalition sergeant who survived the outer perimeter breach on Zevra Prime. He said, "They moved like death with discipline." In the aftermath, Talek, the analyst who had first raised the warning, was reassigned. Not punished, but buried in red tape. His report remained sealed, buried beneath layers of bureaucratic noise. He knew better than to fight it. But he also knew something no one else seemed ready to admit. Earth hadn't shown its strength that day. It had shown its restraint. In a quiet archive on a backwater moon, Talek began collecting unauthorized reports, incidents from years past that didn't make sense. Weapon caches gone missing. Pirate clans disappearing overnight. Civil wars that ended before they began. All coinciding with human diplomatic failures. He began to see the pattern. Zevra Prime wasn't Earth's arrival. It was the warning they should have heeded decades ago. Maddox eventually left the service, not retired, just vanished. No ceremony, no file trail. Some whispered he ran off-world. Others said he was in Creo, waiting for the next breach of silence. The truth? Maddox now walked among those he trained, part of a lineage of operators who lived between history and myth. one of the rescued captives, the young woman, later published her memoir. It never mentioned the seals directly. But in the acknowledgments, she wrote, "To the shadows that carried me home, you reminded me Earth never forgets its own." The book became a quiet bestseller. Not for its writing, but for the silence between the lines. Somewhere beyond Earth, in a sector ruled by prideful bureaucrats and polished armor, a phrase began to circulate among junior officers, passed in whispers, etched into locker walls, spoken only when no one else was listening. Never mock Earth's special forces. Because if you do, they won't send a fleet. They'll send 6 ghosts. And when they are done, no one will remember how they got in. Only that you were never heard from again.